everybody. Welcome to Let's Do Lunch. Today is Friday, so we'll be covering the business of music. First off, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's bottom nav, and make sure to change the drop down there to all panelists and attendees so that everybody sees your introductions. Feel free to drop in your LinkedIn, what have you. It's a great way to chat and get to know other folks. Also, if you have panel questions for these guys, please put them in the Q&A button, which is just to the left of the chat, and they're going to make sure to be looking at questions. Later in the event today, we'll also have a poll for audience, and we look forward to getting people's responses on a few different interesting questions around the topic today. So today's topic is music production in the cloud. And I think this is going to be fascinating because we've been talking about this topic really from kind of a bigger strategy business perspective, but we're going to get a look here at how the pieces of the puzzle really work together. So we have Norman Arnold. Norman will be our moderator. He's a Hollywood-based creative director. We have Eliot Sakhartov, who is a tech strategist at Microsoft. And then we have Henry Dennis, who is a UK recording artist. And they've been working together. We're going to see the tools that they're using and how they are producing content in the cloud. So if you guys could come on, I'll turn it over to Norm to take it over. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ned. Appreciate that. Great to be here. Thanks, Ned, for everything you're doing and Tinzar and all these sessions. They've been fantastic. And we're excited to be here with Eliot and Henry. What we're going to do is talk a little bit, of course, about music production. We're going to show you how we've been working. First, a little bit of an overview. It is the business of music. And as Ned and I were discussing earlier, it needs to be discussed. Let's pull the Band-Aid off. It hasn't been going well, obviously. Everyone's been severely impacted. COVID-19 is affecting a lot of industries, but I think music and touring has been significantly impacted. Goldman Sachs report for 2020, 25% revenue down for global music, 75% down for live music. It's pretty bad. So there was an article in Rolling Stone with Marty Hom, who's a tour manager, discussing really the trickle-down economics of how bad things are for a lot of the working people in music right now. He was supposed to go out with the Rolling Stones. That's obviously been postponed, but really the economic impact has been significant in the side musicians, everyone who works on all of that production. So how are we managing? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. How are we pushing forward in creative? How are music professionals, whether they're artists, producers, working in cloud collaboration? Specifically, Henry and I were supposed to be here in LA right now. We had studios booked, we had musicians booked, and we were working on about 20-song album projects. So, what are we doing? How do we manage during this time? So today we're going to get into that. As Ned mentioned, we're also going to show you. Henry is working on a few songs. We've been working together, cloud collaborating. Henry will play a little bit of the songs we're working on, and I'll be able to push to my screen and show you in Pro Tools exactly how we're doing this, how we're uploading to the cloud, and how we're continuing to just move forward with creative. So we have a lot to go over. I think we do want to talk about a lot of the technical side of things, and I think I'm going to bring in Eliot to kind of take over from first tell us about your role at Microsoft, what you've been doing, and some of the partnerships, and maybe an outline of how the cloud's collaborative elements that you've put together with Microsoft and the other shows you're working on. Give us an outline of how that's all coming together.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Norman. So I'm Eliot Sakhartov. I am the account executive. Essentially, what I do is I look after the relationship through Microsoft across all of our products, from productivity to the cloud to data and AI, with a bunch of our media and entertainment partners that are based on the West Coast. So I have relationships with people at Live Nation, as well as Warner Music, as well as some of the agencies like CAA and William Morris. Really, we sit and work about trying to solve their business problems and try to figure out how technology can actually do that. Whether it's remote collaboration for audio, for music creation, or it's editorial, or just how do we collaborate better. You know, this is actually a good segue to talking about how we looked at a problem that the show The Voice was having, right? So they can't have a bunch of, 150 people sitting on set all working together as they're trying to produce a show, but yet the show still has to go on. So how did we use our collaboration tools in order to bring that entire production together? And so what you'll see is we actually used our product called Teams, which similar to Zoom is more of a collaboration suite that has both audio and video. You can make phone calls, you can do video calls, you can share files, you can share calendars, all those things happen within that suite. And so we were able to bring in all of that technology and produce, or at least support the production of the show. So there was some normalization and the show could continue on. But that's not the only way. So, that's actually one solve, and is Norman and you and Henry are probably finding out that just sending your data and your content through Zoom or through Teams or through Skype or whatever tool you're using, there's a lot of technical challenges that come along with that. And so when you have a single artist, some of those things don't necessarily become a bigger problem. But when you have multiple artists, maybe there's a band where you've got 4 pieces, 5 pieces, 10-piece band. How do you guys create and pull in all of those instruments and then create an audio track when you want to stream it out live, have it be cohesive? And so we're thinking about how we can use the cloud, and I'm going to show you guys here in a second just a few of the bits and pieces that we have in the cloud. But how do we use that cloud to collect the content, bring it all together, stitch it together so that there's no latency in it? Henry's in the UK right now. Norm, you're in Hollywood. There's just physics that prevents you guys from actually having the audio come in at the same time. You guys probably noticed that when you start talking over one another, because we're all now working from home, you start talking over one another and there's a delay, and it's all that latency that gets involved. So we're thinking about how can we use technology to reduce and remove that latency and line everything up and push it all together. So let me just share this screen here. And just quickly, in typical Microsoft fashion, I only have 487 slides, so I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. But one thing I actually do want to point out to you guys is just from a voice perspective, and this is because we're talking about music, we're talking about just audio in and of itself. What you'll see at the bottom of my screen is it's actually doing a real-time translation. So I'm speaking in English, I think. That my voice is traveling to the cloud. The cloud is doing a speech-to-text translation, and it's actually pushing it directly back into PowerPoint natively. One of the features that's coming down the pipe is that you'll also be able to not only see it in English, but if you happen to be in Germany and don't speak English, you can actually have this text be translated automatically into your native language. Really powerful, interesting things that the cloud can enable that just weren't enabled before. So panels in multiple languages all at the same time can be done, for example. So if you wanted to do a presser and have, Japan and Germany and don't want to do it multiple times, you can actually have it all happen in one single event. Pretty cool stuff. The question comes around, like, what is the cloud? This is something that we hear a lot. Cloud is just a nebulous term, but what it is essentially is it's a large grouping of very large structures that have lots and lots of compute power that are all interconnected. And the idea here is that all those interconnected machines are closer and closer to where you are and can scale almost infinitely to serve whatever your needs are. That's where we see latency. And can we use the fact that Microsoft has gone and invested significantly in the pipes that are interconnecting them to reduce the ability to take that latency out of the engagements. What the cloud essentially also gives us is the ability to do millions and millions of decisions, having computers do that on our behalf, both with an intelligent edge, which is how we reduce that latency, as well as in introducing data and AI capabilities that give you stuff like this speech translation to stuff like automatically recognizing who's in a video or who's singing or what they've said and translating into multiple languages. All of that's what the cloud can enable for us. But really, from our perspective, none of this is really done unless we have a multitude of partners that can do that. And when we think about, the work that you and Henry are doing, we really think about essentially Avid, which is a big Microsoft partner. We think about Aspera to move content around very quickly, and we think about Adobe, and their tool sets. These are all excellent partners with ours, and they all fit really nicely within our ecosystem. There's other partners there as well, but that's really who, when we're talking about the music industry, what we're really focused on. I'm going to stop the share there.
That's great, Eliot. That's super insightful, and yeah, really, really great. I think one of the obviously you hit on the main issue of latency and also compression, and the way that audio is compressed in the cloud, and even for different platforms. Even with Henry and I, we've worked on different platforms. We're struggling a bit, and even I think it's actually interesting to bring up now. We can bring in Henry and talk about his process, but you can even hear when he plays now over Zoom, like the sound is compressed. It's really, it's a real challenge. And we, frankly, as much as we love Zoom, we don't really use it to collaborate together. We use different platforms just because you'll hear when we play, and I'm going to bring you share my Pro Tools screen and play it back. It's crunchy, it's compressed, it's not ideal. But one thing I'm interested in, and I think other musicians might be, is the latency issue. I mean, how does a company develop what it would be these solutions for like a latency issue? Is it R&D? How far along is it? I know we talked a little bit about what's like a not necessarily a top secret project, but what can you tell us about, because that would, from a producer's perspective and musicians, to be, if Henry was in the UK, I'm here, to have no latency and high sound quality. Like,
yeah.
What does it take to get there? And then also, I mean, sort of a second part to that question for you is, as you'll see in Pro Tools, we have a device within the software to cloud collaborate directly cross-platform, and we're very excited about it, but we're not quite there yet. So, how do we cross into this area where it's all going to work for us?
So when we think about, or at least what I'm thinking about from reduction of latency, is for a live jam, right? Like, how do I give the impression that I'm back in front of an audience? How do I give them that live experience? And what a lot of the artists have done is they've said, oh, I'm just going to go out to Facebook, or I'm going to go to Instagram, which is technically the same thing, where I'm just going to, or even YouTube, and just stream this stuff out. And then what they're like, well, I'm really good on the vocals, but my guitarist is actually, across the country, and we can't be together. How do we still have a live jam or a live session together and have it actually make sense when it goes out to the world? Because what will happen is I'll be a few bars off, or the person will just be on a completely different portion of the song. And then when it gets all mixed together, it just doesn't sound great because because the latency, sound can only travel so fast. So what we've done is we've looked at that as a problem, and we said, okay, we can intelligently understand from a metadata perspective what it's supposed to sound like. And we can intelligently understand what the individual stems coming in. So we're thinking of stems as the piano stem, we're thinking of stem as the guitar stem, we're thinking of the audio track, we're thinking of pulling those all together. And if we know the underlying layer of what it's supposed to sound like, we can then start to line those pieces up. And then once we've lined those pieces up, we can then mix the whole thing together and compare it against what the standard track should be. And if it's close enough, we will then broadcast that back out. If it's not, if maybe you dropped out for 10 seconds, right, in the middle of a session, you dropped out for 10 seconds. Well, we're going to delay that output for those 10 seconds because we know we're missing this piece of audio. So we're going to delay it, then we're going to mix it again, and then we're going to broadcast it back out. So for an end consumer person on the other side, they would have no idea that you dropped out for 10 seconds because the audio coming through is fantastic and great. So that's how we're thinking about solving that latency problem. that's really for real-time collaboration. Like real time, let's do a live session, let's get it out to the world. When we think about production, it's a very different animal. It's what you and Henry are going through right now, which is let's move all that heavy equipment that I can see in your back and right behind you. Let's take all those computers out of the on-prem environment and let's push all of that into the cloud. Now, it does have dependencies upon the quality of your equipment. I can see you've got a really nice mic in front of you. I'm sure Henry's got a way to pull in, stuff from his guitar and his piano. Maybe he's using a keyboard, but that sound quality coming in is really key to this, obviously, because you don't want to have compressed audio as part of your Pro Tools session. So they're two different sort of scenarios, but we're looking at them both to solve the different needs.
Yeah, no, Eliot, that's great. I mean, I think you're right. There's a technology issue in compression, but then there's also, just you said, microphones, gear, things like that. And I think you've really, you've addressed that. I think maybe just to sort of demonstrate. I mean, we had said at the top of this, I think it's really important for people to see how we're using these tools. A lot of the tech explanation's fantastic, but what does it really look like in the real world? And actually, what does it really sound like? And that's something that I think it's a good time we can bring in Henry. And first, just to thank you, Henry, so much for agreeing to do this. This, as most of you know, artists are very proprietary with their sound, and for Henry to agree to come on in a not perfect environment and to do this, I think, thank you, Henry. I mean, as Eliot said, we should be in the same room right now. We're not. We're doing the best we can, but I'll explain a little bit. Henry is a great, very obviously you can hear, a talented singer and songwriter. We've been working together for a while. He is in the UK, in the Cotswolds, was it north of Oxford? And and so we've actually set up a system where we can continue to work. We should be in the same room. We're not, and we're doing the best we can. So what equipment do you use to capture audio? How are you doing this? And just give us a little bit of that to kick this off.
Well, I suppose for most musicians, they can't afford the kind of gear that you can see in the background that Norman's got. So nothing is ever really going to beat going into a studio, because most musicians can't afford that gear. But in the meantime, we can just do the best we can with whatever we've got. And so we found that we could both work in Pro Tools, because there's a free Pro Tools online, which is good for all musicians, Pro Tools first. And so I downloaded that, and it just works straight off. And that's the other thing musicians want. They just want to plug something in, it works straight off. You can record your vocal, record your guitar, and sounds great, and off it goes. And particularly someone like me who's very audio based with instruments, I imagine that the cloud will work really well for people who are more in the electronic music with MIDI, because it's easier to fire that down. You don't need the expensive mics, the preamps. It just goes in, as MIDI. But I don't have that luxury. Yeah. No,
it makes sense. And so maybe you can explain, well, I can help you just about how switching, listen, for some musicians who are interested in more of a direct iCloud transfer. You were using Cubase for a while, and we're talking about what musician software, like what's available to musicians, and explain maybe some of the transition as a creative musician, how you moved from, say, Cubase into Pro Tools, and kind of what that process was for you.
Well, I mean, I've been in Cubase for 20 years or so, and I've reluctantly, I've tried to avoid Pro Tools because I knew it's the market industry, the industry standard, which I shy away from. I thought it was more Mac. I thought it was expensive, complicated, all those sort of things. It's not. It's very good for PCs. I'm a PC guy. My wife's got a Mac, so I don't need to worry too much. And it's no more complicated. In fact, it's very intuitive. And I was actually having a few problems with Cubase, and as soon as I put Pro Tools in, it solved those problems with a little, you just want something where, okay, I've got a problem, YouTube, this is my problem, solved. Whereas with Cubase, YouTube, here's my problem, it didn't solve it. No offense to Cubase, it's just that's what happens. So if something works, I'll move to it. And so Pro Tools worked. And so I actually moved from Pro Tools first into Pro Tools Perpetual, because I just thought, well, this is working for me. I'm going to get it. I'm just going to buy it.
Yeah, this is great. And that's just in terms of people who are listening, and that's a subscription based. And so that's where the shift from you can license Pro Tools, you can have it in your rig. And it's there is Pro Tools first, which is free. But then if you want to begin to update, do a little bit more iCloud collaboration, there are certainly paths that you can use to upgrade.
Yeah, I actually went for the one that isn't subscription. I got the Perpetual. So I just bought it outright rather than have to get the slightly. It's like 3 layers. There's the free one. There's the next one that you can buy outright. I think you can do a subscription, but I just thought just get it. And then there's the real Super Pro one.
This is right.
It's all the same format. They all look the same, and all these workstations are pretty similar. They're very intuitive. Once you know one, you kind of know them all. So as long as it works for me, I'm going to use it.
That's great. Yeah, and there's just a little bit of the business end of this of how companies have moved to subscription based, even with software. I mean, Premiere has it, of course, Adobe Suites, and now Music Audio as well too. So you can buy the standalone, you can turn to subscription. So, well, we can kind of segue into this if if you're up for it, Henry. I know we're putting you on the spot in not what I would call an ideal situation. So again, we say thank you. If we want to just kind of show people and really explain, like when we're working together, like we talked about, this is pulling the curtain back a little bit. A couple weeks ago, we were working I was in front of my piano, and Henry came and said, I have this new song. And, we would play it over, I think we're on Skype. I mean, it was definitely not quite as compressed, but, you want to give an idea of this song, maybe tell us a little bit about it, and play a little bit down, maybe whatever it is, intro, chorus, and just give us a little outline, and then we can show how you and I work, and then how we've put it into Pro Tools and how we're working.
Yeah, so I've had this bit. It was on piano originally, and I just played it to Norman. He went, yeah, but it needs something a bit more. It needs what he calls a landing spot. He's always very polite about it. What he's really saying is write a chorus now. So I had to write a chorus, and went back, and he was, okay, we'll put that here. And so our process is I come up with something, and he'll go, okay, but we need a little bit there, and I cut that bit out, sing that bit quieter. But we're very much in pre-production at the moment. So that's our process really, and we can do all that on Skype, and then once we get off Skype, I've then got to go to the engineering side and open up Pro Tools, put it down, and send it to him. Which is why if we could get the cloud working, it would just be super quick. I can just literally play the guitar in, press a button, he can open his Pro Tools, and he's got it. And it's just time saving. I mean, that's what we want. We just want time saving, efficiency, and for it to work. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, and Henry, so why don't we're putting you on the spot? Why don't you play down a little bit of A Simple Heart, and then we can transfer over, and I can show what that looks like and how we bring it in and work together. Okay,
I'm just going to play a chorus verse chorus of it, because you'll hear why.
You'll hear the compression.
It is Friday, and this is all about music, so we should at least hear some music, even if you're not really going to hear a guitar. Here goes. This simple heart is on its way again. No stones to hold it down. It's heading on. This simple heart is on the open road. No longer at the end. It's heading home. We listened to the radio, thought that we were happy just singing along. You danced around and let me go. Didn't see the edge we were teetering on. I know that you're in love, just not with me. You were only being kind. No more conversations. Head out in the storm. And you and I will never lie forever like we always thought we would do. On we go. This simple heart is on its way again. No stones to hold it down. It's heading home. Heading home.
Henry Dennis. There you go. Henry Dennis.
If you want to hear that done properly, I am going to do a Facebook Live gig next Friday, 8 p.m. Henry Dennis and the Fumes of Mars.
That's right. And thanks, Nick Blake, for the comments. Great song. You got some fans, Henry. Yeah, and thank you for the comments. And yeah, Henry, thank you. We know it's not ideal, but you know, you did. It sounds as good as it possibly can. I think we're all Zoom fatigued. We all know, you know, really we can tell. Ebony Tay, super beautiful, Henry. So you're getting fans.
Thanks.
So, and so this is how you know our process would sort of unfold here. You know, we would listen to the songs, and you can tell, you know, it's a really nice song. You can tell listening, whatever compression is, you can still tell Henry's obviously a very talented singer. It's a beautiful song. So then the question becomes, you know, what next? And you know, there was I think another comment here. Two things just I'll address. Eric Mendelson asked, you know, what software we're dealing right now with Pro Tools. It's like, you know, Avid Pro Tools, and Henry has Pro Tools first. So we're going to get into that. And Nick Blake, you know, yes, it's a good session to describe how we're really working with this software. So address a few of those as we move along. If any have questions, we're going to go to a Q&A. So go into the Q&A. And there's also, before I switch screens, there's also a poll. I don't know if we can maybe get the poll go. So yeah, here's the poll. And you can just sort of run through this as we're going along here, you know, about cloud collaborating, paying for online concerts, being comfortable going to a live music venue, you know, and then of course, Rolling Stones or Beatles. We have you can do that in your own time as we move along. Nolan Henry's set is amazing. Thanks. Yeah. So what happens is you can tell Henry's obviously very, very talented. I'm going to share my screen now and say, okay, it's like, what happens next? Like as a producer, I meet with an artist and we talk about the content. Where do we want this to go? So then if I go in here, again, we're in Pro Tools, and what I can just give you just an outline of what we're doing. This area up here is all of our little cloud central where we're able to file share. When Henry does a song, you can see guitar 1, guitar 2, and his vocal track. What we do now, after Henry's played the song down, we choose a tempo. This one happened to be a 114. We set our Pro Tools sessions. He has his Pro Tools first session downloaded, and he's on a PC. So again, we're cross-platformed. And he'll set his click, set his tempo, open up the session, play down his guitar parts, and then go into this session over here where you can see it says collaboration, and hits the up arrow, and everything starts to upload to me. And in here, we can see inviting contacts. You can see Henry Dennis, add Henry Dennis. We're able to share back and forth. Now, what we end up working on is, what are the building blocks of the basic song? We have our introduction, we have our chorus. Are we going to have background vocals? How does it all outline with the band? And so we start to put this together, and you can see down here there's some shakers, bass, strings, B3 organ. I've muted a lot of the tracks because when it plays through Zoom, it's going to get really, really crunchy again. But I'll just play you a little bit of this and you can get an idea of where we're at.
Simple heart is on the open road, no longer at the end, it's heading home. Listen to the radio.
All right, that's just a sort of a brief outline of how this all works. So as we continue to work, we just keep sharing back and forth. I'll add some drums, I'll add guitars, I'll add extra keyboards, and we're in real time. We also, sometimes if we're not directly uploading and downloading, you can still create files using Dropbox. You can still create files in other platforms for file sharing. And as long as you're working in waves, as long as you have the same file, the same tempo, this is just really, really easy to do. I worked on a project, some of you may or may not know, a station group called Tegna. They're in the United States, they're US based. They have about 50 station groups across the US. And we were able to collaborate and work on content in multiple different cities with different musicians, a horn section in Pasadena, a drummer in Miami, and we're all able to continue to work in this fashion. So, you know, there's plenty of opportunities. There's plenty of ways to continue this. And I think it's just an interesting time talking to Eliot and talking to, you know, what Microsoft is doing to just push this forward. I think we were all right there, you know, we were all almost like doing this stuff, but I think now with just, you know, the state of our quarantine, there's pressure to like, let's get rid of that compression that you hear, that weird sound. Let's get rid of latency. Yeah, that's why I think it's almost like a silver lining, if you will, you know, that we're having to push this technology forward.
I think I would just say that I think our goal in general is just to get the technology out of the way, right? Just kind of make that ubiquitous so that you don't have to worry about it. So you guys are using the tools that you guys are using. So Avid's, you know, Pro Tools is the tool that you use, and that doesn't change. We're just enabling. And it sort of made me think about something that some of my other colleagues were working on, where we just did the Chattanooga Film Festival, right? So it's a 100% in-person attendee sort of thing that they were thinking about canceling because obviously of the current situation with COVID. So we actually helped them migrate that entire thing online, both from the easy stuff. The easy stuff really is, you know, sending a video to you. We do it all day long. You got Netflix, you got Amazon Prime, all those things are sort of like low-hanging fruit. But then it was the other stuff, the Q&A panels. How do we enable that through technology? And so we were able to take the tool set that we have that the cloud has enabled for us and apply those things to things like panels. And, you know, we're doing one right now through Zoom. The technology sort of becomes the background, and the creative process is really what comes to the foreground. And that's the general goal.
No, I think that's great, and I think you know, to push it back. I mean, I have a question for, you know, for Henry, who's been sort of, you know, thrust into this, you know, to take on what you know, Eliot's been saying. I mean, what are, you know, Henry, for you, let's get your take on this, because you're trying to be creative, you're writing. What are the main elements that if we could like just all of a sudden, you know, wave a magic Microsoft wand or something, and then, you know, you had an ideal setup as a real, you know, musician, as a creator, what are some of the things that would really help you right now?
I think that, for example, when in Pro Tools, for example, if on the cloud, all the effects that the originator has, i.e. if Norman's put a session up, if his effects can go on it, at the moment, when I access it, I don't get his effects. So, you know, obviously either I've got to buy the whole lot, but most musicians aren't going to be able to afford what someone who owns a studio can. So if There's some way, or you know, a small payment or something, just some way to get those effects, all the processing that Norman does in his studio, into that session, so that I can, when I play what he's worked on, I can hear all his effects. You know, that's one thing. The latency is a massive problem, and an amazing thing if you can sort that out. I can't see how you can. But that's not my job. But I mean, it'd be great, because then for rehearsals, for gigs, you know, you don't have to all buy a rehearsal studio. You don't have to go, you know, you don't have to meet up. You can just say, okay, we're going to do a rehearsal, because normally it can be a month of rehearsal before you're ready for a big gig, for the big bands anyway. And you could just do all that one evening from your home. Everyone does a rehearsal, and then hire rehearsal space just for the last 2 days before the gig. You know, it's going to save time and money. You know, so you can still be with your family if that, you know, that's a problem for a lot of musicians. You're going to be away a long time. Well, you know, you can stay at home a lot and do those rehearsals from home. You know.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'll address two things that you mentioned. I mean, the one being, just so everyone's on the same page with, when Henry's talking about effects, he's talking about internal software in Pro Tools that it has, for instance, reverb or echo. You know, there's a whole third party area that adds these type of effects that give a voice a certain characteristic. That's kind of what and if I have something that's not necessarily proprietary or native to Pro Tools, you can purchase these third-party effects, and that's what he means. Like, there's a special reverb or a special echo that makes things sound a certain way. So that, just so we all know, you know, what that is, and that what he means is when my file goes to the cloud, when he downloads it, if he doesn't actually have those specific pieces of reverb, it doesn't sound the same. So there's this, what the solution though is, which we'll talk about offline, Henry, is that we just need to use the same. I just need to know what you have.
Yeah. No, well, I know I'm being a cheapskate, really. I'll tell you.
Well, wait, yeah. So that's all fine. So, and then the second part, yeah, is exactly what we've talked about since you know, Eliot so eloquently informed us about how all of this latency issue and what they're working on. I think, you know, it's a little bit down the way. So yeah, those are sort of the basics. So it's, you know, we have some questions. We have the poll. Do we, let's see, we can do a little bit of a Q&A if you guys want to start in. And then I guess we can wait on the poll a little bit. You can start to do this. So, this is great. Again, with Nick Blake, it's awesome. This is how collaborating should be happening all over the place. You definitely, you know, appreciate that. And there are bumps. Well, here's something. What do you think about AI tools for music creation? This is an anonymous attendee, but you know, I don't know anything about AI tools for music. And Eliot, is there something that you are working with over there? Do you have any answers to this?
So it's not something well, I mean, would you consider auto-tune an AI tool?
No, actually, I don't think. I think when I think of artificial intelligence, I mean, well, I think that's an interesting question. Is auto-tune? Well, no, because it's a technical, like, I guess what I think of artificial intelligence, I think of when you were sharing your screen and your voice capture was coming in, right? Like,
yeah. So I'm sure there's people that are applying some sort of artificial intelligence either to create the score or, you know, just to do certain elements, maybe bring in a bass line or a drum in the background that just is automatically generated. What I have seen is some technologies to determine the mood of the music, the color and the mood of the music. So that you can generate metadata, so you can categorize songs based upon those moods and those colors. So I've seen stuff like that, but to actually generate the songs themselves, yeah, there's people out there just pushing machine learning, you know, data sets and saying, I want a song that sounds like Beethoven, or I want a song that sounds like X. And what you do is you feed them all those songs, this machine, all those songs, and then it just sort of generates lyrics plus music at the same time. You know, I think for me, I think there's some element missing from it.
Yep.
you know, and I'm sure Henry probably thinks something similar. I'm sure he's got some opinions about automatically generated music, but yeah, those are the applications that I've seen from an AI perspective when it comes to this.
Great.
I listened to it last night, actually, the Eurovision, or the winners of that AI competition.
Oh, interesting. Hey, here's sort of two questions that I think are interesting and on point, and they kind of, I'll read them both, and they kind of come in together. One's from an anonymous attendee, the other one's from Ebonite, but it's like a production question for Norman and Henry. It says, are you having to produce music with a more minimalist approach? And then there's a side question is about plugins for creative, and it's sort of what Henry was talking about, plugins. But then another one that kind of works together here is, how can tech be used to create more intimacy between artists and fans? And it goes on a little bit, because this is, it seems like esports games creators have figured this out, providing engaging experiences with their fans, but musicians, not Henry, of course, who's great, says it here, not just me, often seem distant from their fans online. And to address all of this, you know, my son went to the Fortnite game with Travis Scott, and I thought that was absolutely incredible. So I do know what you mean about that engagement. And, you know, I interestingly enough, there's two parts happening now, and I do think an artist like Henry has almost like a gravitational pull right now, because people want just the way Henry sings, his voice, and his, I think in music, people are responding more to a little bit almost less produced. Like you said, this is the Ebony Tape, a little bit more minimalist, because it's a little more honest. And I think without the tech part of it, I do think artists who are a little bit more open right now, maybe vulnerable, are receiving a little bit more attention than I think they had in the past. So, you know, I don't know, that's from my perspective. I don't know, Henry, from your perspective, if you feel like there's any, like been a creative shift, or how would you, you've been doing Facebook Live concerts. Do you feel like you have, you know, you've been obviously working in Europe a lot. How do you feel about that intimacy between, you know, what you've been doing and now your Facebook Live?
Funny enough, I quite like Facebook Live now. I mean, I think when you're doing a set anyway, if you kind of get your, you kind of know what you're going to say between, and you, in my head, if you can do it, I make up what the audience is saying. So I just sort of pretend they are there, and you can see all the little hearts and the likes, and you can see comments coming in, so you can see people you know appearing and saying things. You can kind of read it while you're playing, which is dangerous, but you can. And it's a different experience. It's not an audience that you can see in front of you and how they're responding. You don't know whether they're dancing, which is a problem, because you might want to, there's been a few songs I've thought, I just want to kick it back in, but maybe everyone's sort of, you know, bored. So that's the bad side of it. And there is a latency again on the chat. So you can be 20 seconds ahead. So you don't know whether they're dancing, and you've already finished the song by the time you read someone say, hey, we're all dancing here, keep going. And you're like, oh, sorry, I've finished, you know. But no, I think it's been great, actually, Facebook Live, for me anyway. So yeah, and you've got quite a big audience too. And also you get feedback straight away. People are leaving comments, whereas you can play a gig and everyone leaves and you go home wondering, well, did they really like it? I don't really know.
And I would say from an audience perspective, I think you get closer to the artist. I mean, we've seen technology sort of start to do that, remove that veil. Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook Live just sort of gets you closer to the artist. And then you have Patreon, where you can have closer things. I just did for my daughter's graduation, I just did a cameo. I had somebody come and do a cameo that addressed her directly. So I think there's ways to use technology to bring you closer and closer to your audience and connect in ways that just you couldn't scale them in the past.
I think that's great. One other thing too, how about another question from Justin King. Henry, can you talk more about your creative process? You want to give us a little insight into just really pure, I guess we'll stop with, you know, a little bit of tech for a minute, and just really what is your songwriting process?
So whatever comes out on the guitar or the piano, you just form it, craft it. And now my main thing is I do looping. I read that one from Justin. So I've got a loop pedal. I've got the Boss RC300, which is the bigger one. It's a big chunky thing. It messes up your entire foot pedal rack. So I've got foot pedals everywhere now because it's the dominant one. But you can loop in that and then find ways of, you can find harmonies that, you know, the vertical side of the music can come in, and yeah, that's been really helpful for me. Yeah.
That's great. Two other for the Q&A from Nolan, he and Patty Jones. The other question about what producers are using this technology, and just in terms of Pro Tools, I think a lot. It says, are the A-listers using? I think right now the good news is that a lot of people I know, the producer who worked with Adele, with Hello, they're all in Logic. I think most recording studios all use Pro Tools for their tracking, for their sessions. It seems to be the most transferable from larger studios to smaller studios. And then the other question from Nolan was about our cloud solutions accessible to independent artists. And I think, Henry, you could answer that. I mean, you're as an independent artist, how has this cloud experience, been for you overall?
For me, it's actually been great because I haven't got a massive audience like some of the large artists. So it's pushed me out into the world. It's not something I would have done. I wouldn't have done Facebook Live. I hadn't even considered it. I've always just thought I'd just get another gig, go there, find a club in London, play. It's just opened up possibilities of reaching so many more people. So, it's a great thing to have done. Yeah, as well as for us, being able to work on the album long distance. I mean, I started on a 56K modem, and you could barely download a photo. So, the whole thing is just phenomenal. So I think you have to, look at the positives and say it's amazing, but still push the techno guys to solve all those major problems.
Eddie, that's great. I mean, I think the fact that, I think that one of the real takeaways is that as an artist, you are looking at the positives. You are looking at the silver lining of what we're doing, and I think that's great. And tie into the Jeff Mayfield question: does Henry anticipate that these many online shows are now going to fill the void, and will they continue when the venues are safe again? Which kind of leads us into our poll. So, Henry, do you think that that online will fill the void? Are you ready to get right back out? What's your take on sort of your Facebook Lives to your live performance?
The problem with Facebook Live is, one, it's not live. It's a bit like going to a studio, and you need to be in a studio to record properly with that expensive gear, particularly with audio equipment. And Facebook Live is still not live. The sound is okay. I've had to find ways of getting the sound good using various tech, but it's still not live. So I'd really like people to hear it live. There's that. It's just a different thing. The bass comes through you. The drum beat,
That's right.
Which doesn't happen live unless one of my friends has a projector and 5.1 surround sound, and imagine he's getting a pretty good sound from it. But most people are just with their phones or their iPads, so you can't guarantee how they're hearing it. So I'd love to get back to live, but looking at that poll, it looks like people are not comfortable going out to live venues.
Let's go over our results, right? So are you currently cloud collaborating? Okay, so 65% on the no and 35% yes. So Eliot, take notes. And then you pay for an online concert. Well, this is interesting. 85% say yes. Like, I actually find that fascinating, and I think that's bodes well. I mean, it actually goes back to, I think, Jeff Mayfield's question about, filling the void. I think that's a real indicator of, I guess, the market data that people are interested in this. And I think it, ties back into how we started this with this really grim, Goldman Sachs report of 75% of this revenue decline from music revenue from live. And I think I'm really, really encouraged with that number. And then will you be comfortable going out to a live music event? I think 65% no. That doesn't surprise me at all, which is, sobering. It's unfortunate, and it's like, it just gets back to how we started this out, not on a happy note.
But move back to point number 2, and you're like, well, okay, that's okay then.
Well, that's exactly right, Henry. And I think that, as Goldman says, there are headwinds, ahead. We're getting into a tough time. It sounds like, buckle up and ride it out. And of course, we have to put in, question number 4, Rolling Stones or Beatles. I mean, I look at that, 65% with Beatles, 35% with Rolling Stones. So
Same as those people going out to live venues.
I know. I got someone else on one of the comments was like, "That's an impossible question." It's like sex or drugs. You're gonna have a poll with rock and roll. You're gonna how do you choose? So yeah, thanks, Ned. It is an impossible question, but we had to stump the audience with at least one. So.
Listen, guys, this was just fantastic, and Henry, thanks for sharing your beautiful sound with us today. It's our first live music on Let's Do Lunch. I've been getting emails from people saying, you got to do that again. This is great, and what a great way to wrap up the week. We're going into another weekend, and I just want to remind people, stay safe, stay healthy, but also get away from your screens if you can. I know we're all spending a lot of time in these environments, and they're great, but it's also good to, if you can get outside, do it, and, smell the fresh air, smell the flowers. Eliot, thanks for coming on. Norm, really appreciate it. Henry, once again. Next week, by the way, Henry, maybe you're starting something, but we have on Monday our Business of Streaming show, and we have Sumya Suraman, who is president of BritBox, which is an OTT streaming service that streams British content, and it's really a popular service started by the BBC, I think, or they're at least a partner in it. And so we'll have her on the show on Monday. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks, Ned.
Thanks all. Great job, all.